Good morning. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Free Press Media Press Inc., an alternative parties books publisher, sponsors this podcast. I'm Andrew Bouchard. Welcome to Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Today we have another exciting guest, like we always have exciting guests. His name is John Ralston, and he represents Voter Choice Arizona. Welcome to the podcast, John.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure to be with you guys.
John, let's get started by you kindly giving us an introduction to yourself, a brief biographical sketch.
Sure. My name is John Ralston. I'm 47 years old. I live in Tucson, Arizona. I'm a licensed massage therapist by trade, but I've since gone back to school to become an acupuncturist. But I have been a fairly passionate advocate for ranked choice voting for approximately 20 years. I'm also an advocate for third parties. The Green Party doesn't necessarily have ballot status here in Arizona, but I tend to align with the Green Party. And I've, because of those couple things, I've aligned myself with an organization called Voter Choice Arizona. We are a grassroots, nonpartisan organization that's working to bring ranked choice voting to Arizona. And so that's what I'm here to talk to you all about today.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that you've been doing this for 20 years. That's awesome.
Well,
So
I've been a proponent of it. I finally got off my lazy rear end only about a year and a half ago. But better late than never.
Sure. Whatever it takes. So since you were a massage therapist and you've been one, has that informed your politics in any way?
A little bit in terms of just connecting with people one-on-one on a human level. People's biography becomes their biology. So when you literally are touching people, you see how various aspects of their life are embedded in their bodies. Whether that can be positive, or people have good economic prospects and education and healthcare and things like that, then you can feel that in their body. And on the other end, if they're struggling and, are stressed out and have poor economic prospects and things like that, you can also feel that in their body. So from that standpoint, it definitely has informed my own personal politics.
Sure. So how did you get involved in voter choice? You mentioned earlier that you've been doing it for a year and some change. So kindly tell us what led you to this organization.
Yeah, so basically, as a massage therapist, I was working for a resort doing massage therapy, and of course, I'm sure everybody is familiar with the what happened with the lockdowns and everything. So I was out of work for approximately 5 months, and sitting home, and I was fortunate to get some public support, but trying to do my part and not be out and about. Spent a lot of time on the internet, social media and things like that. And, this was in 2020 leading up to the election. So there's a lot of political talk going on. And I just happened to stumble across Voter Choice Arizona, which had happened to, I didn't start getting involved until around July of 2020, but they actually formed in March of 2020. But unfortunately, they formed right as the pandemic was starting to escalate. So anyways, I got involved and volunteered and have thrown myself into the organization. Like I said, it's the grassroots organization. So we just recently have raised enough money to hire one paid staff person, but up until just recently, it's been an all-volunteer organization. And basically, the bigger picture is that there was an organization in Massachusetts called Voter Choice Massachusetts that was spearheaded the ranked choice voting initiative in Massachusetts. And for those who aren't familiar, that didn't succeed. But the people from that organization then formed a kind of a parent organization called Rank the Vote that then kind of Johnny Appleseeded other state organizations in the United States, and Voter Choice Arizona was that organization that grew in Arizona. So kind of the organizers of Rank the Vote kind of identified some activists in each state, in this case Arizona. They organized and formed the structure of the organization, and got it off the ground. And Rank the Vote provides, training and assistance, but we're an autonomous organization working within Arizona to try and implement ranked choice voting in the way that meets the needs of Arizonans.
Interesting. It's interesting that you found this during the pandemic, so that's interesting how the bad situation, you were able to make something good out of it.
Absolutely.
You touched on this earlier. Kindly go into more detail about what's the mission of Voter Choice Organization. Voter Choice Arizona.
I don't have the mission statement committed to memory. I'm probably a bad person for not doing that before the interview. But essentially, we're trying to give voters more voice and more choice, and we're trying to do that through ranked choice voting. And then, if there are other reforms that couple with ranked choice voting, then we will entertain those as well.
Okay. So ranked choice voting is the focus of the organization.
Correct.
So what role are you in the organization?
So I'm not necessarily in leadership, but I do a lot of work for the organization. There are different teams within the organization, and I'm on the outreach team, the social media team, and the speakers team. And then they have we have a local adoptions team that's kind of the implementation arm of our organization, fundraising, research, policy and research, website. There are all kinds of different teams. So if if there are any Arizonans listening and you're gung-ho to join us, it doesn't matter what your skills are. Sign on the dotted line, but come in and join us. We'll put you to work in whatever way you feel comfortable doing that.
So you can use a wide variety of different people with different skills.
Absolutely. Everybody has value. Everybody has skills. Everybody has a circle of influence. So you are important, and you can help us advance the cause.
Sure. So kindly tell us, what are the arguments your organization puts forth in favor of ranked choice voting?
Well, essentially, as we kind of said with our mission statement, it gives people more voice and more choice. When we kind of dig down into that, we have to kind of set up a contrast with what our current voting system is like. And our current voting system, in my words, is structurally coercive, and it limits voters' choices.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is that the structure of our current voting system is a zero-sum game, so that even though people can technically vote for who they want, essentially they are forced to vote for one of two candidates, basically, in this case, the Democrats or Republicans. Now, this sets up a paradox in that Americans have a First Amendment right to run for office. They have a First Amendment right to vote for whoever they want, but the way that we currently vote structurally coerces them into not voting for the candidate that they do want if there are multiple candidates on the ballot because of the structure of our current voting system. And this decreases choices and discourages candidates from running. And if candidates do even get on the ballot, then voters are discouraged from voting for them because of this structure. Basically, the technical term is called vote splitting. The more generic term is something called the spoiler effect. And this happens because our current voting system works just fine if there are only two candidates, but if there are more than two candidates, then this vote splitting comes into play, and that hinders people's ability to vote for the candidate that represents them best. And candidates represent voters; they also represent issues. And by limiting what this kind of coercive structure of our voting system discourages candidates from running, and it also keeps issues off the table. So, I think a lot of time we look at elections purely in terms of a horse race, in terms of winners and losers, and that, of course, is important. But elections also serve the purpose of putting problems on the table and putting solutions to those problems on the table as well. And there is no way that, two people or two parties can possibly represent all of the problems and all the solutions that face our, communities, our states, our country, the world, what have you. So ranked choice voting as a simple kind of wonky voting format, it actually frees voters to vote for who they want and make authentic choices. And that has secondary ancillary benefits in terms of competition, in terms of ideas, in terms of perspectives. So essentially, that was a long-winded way of saying, it allows you to vote for whoever represents you best, and that if the candidate you love can't win, then you have backup choices. And then it ensures that a candidate wins with a majority of the vote, meaning more than 50%. Right now, with our current voting system, candidates can win with a plurality, and that means that they get the most votes. But when there are more than two candidates in an election, somebody can win with a plurality, but not necessarily a majority, meaning more than 50% of the vote. So that's kind of what we're doing. That was kind of a long, circuitous answer. Did I answer your question?
Yes, yes. We've heard of a number of different models for ranked choice voting. We've had other organizations present ranked choice voting ideas. So I ask you, do you have any limits on the number of candidates that would run under your model for ranked choice voting, or is that something that you don't want to decide?
We haven't, as an organization, decided that yet.
Okay.
Basically, there are essentially kind of three, maybe four different models of the way ranked choice voting can be implemented. One is for overseas voters that in states that have, or elections that have a runoff. So you see that in a lot of southern states. Everybody else has to vote as a plurality. But for particularly southern states, they have runoff elections. So in those situations, election officials will mail ballots overseas to military and overseas voters. So that's one way that doesn't really get a lot of attention, but that's a way that we can implement ranked choice voting. The other three ways are represented in nobody else uses this language. This is my language. I represent them in terms of the states or localities in which they're implemented. So we have what I refer to as the Alaska model, and the difference in these models is in terms of how the primary is dealt with.
Okay.
So with Alaska, they have ranked choice voting, they have partisan primaries, and then they have ranked choice voting in the primary, and then they have ranked choice voting in the general election. Now, Alaska, as I'm sure some of your audience knows, has just implemented a hybrid version of ranked choice voting that incorporates a nonpartisan / open primary. So there are no more partisan primaries. All candidates compete in the open primary, and then a certain number of candidates who get the most votes. So in Alaska's case, the top four candidates that get the most votes in the open primary advance to the general election, and that's conducted with ranked choice voting. And then a third model is what I refer to as the Utah model. There are 23 cities in Utah that use ranked choice voting,
Wow.
and they have chosen to completely eliminate the primary. Everybody competes in the general election. It's conducted with ranked choice voting, and that's beneficial because, at least on the municipal level, you can eliminate the primary, and if your city has a runoff election, then you can eliminate the runoff, and that's beneficial because, one, it saves cities money. It saves voters time. You don't have to go out multiple times to vote. And then runoff elections tend to be lower turnout, so they tend not to be as representative. Even though the idea behind a runoff election is to ensure a candidate wins with 50% or more, the irony is that by having this extra runoff election, it actually decreases turnout, and that actually tends to affect people of color and marginalized communities. So it has a little bit, so ironically, runoff elections tend to have a little bit of a voter suppressive effect. So there's basically three different models: Maine, Alaska, Utah. How you choose to deal with that is kind of up to the organization. We haven't gotten that far yet. We're right now looking to try and do ranked choice voting on the city level, and we're targeting cities that have runoff elections. So we would pursue kind of the Utah model.
Sure.
In terms of kind of pros and cons, you know, if you do the main model, then basically the parties can decide on who they want in their party, and they could have as many people participate in the primary, use ranked choice voting to make sure that everybody coalesces around a majority candidate, and that candidate then competes in the general election, and then you can have Democrats, Republicans, any other third parties compete in the general election, any independents compete in the general election, and that generally third parties and independents aren't tremendously organized. There aren't tons of third parties and independents, so you'll see 3 to 5, maybe 6 candidates in a general election in that model. The benefit of the Alaska model is everybody competes in the primary. Independents can choose whoever they want, and then those top 4 or 5, there's basically a variation of the Alaska model called Title V voting that's being pushed in some states. So if top 4 or 5 people advance to the general election conducted with ranked choice voting, you come up with a majority support candidate, and that has benefits. The negative, I would say, to that Alaska model, at least from a third party perspective, is that there's no guarantee that your third party will advance to the general election. If you're all competing in an open or nonpartisan open primary, there's a possibility that your candidate loses in the primary and doesn't get to take their candidacy and their issues to the general election. But that's what the people of Alaska have decided works for them. I believe the Green Party and Libertarian Party were behind, endorsed this approach, so it works for them. So God bless America. States as the laboratories of democracy. And then obviously the Utah model, probably has the most democracy, the most purest form of democracy. Everybody who qualifies for the ballot competes, but then theoretically that could be unwieldy in terms of the number of candidates. So there are these different things that have to be negotiated. That's kind of where the secret sauce gets made within a ranked choice voting organization, and that's something that organizations need to grapple with and come to an understanding of what they want to accomplish.
Sure. So earlier you mentioned targeting the cities to get them to adopt ranked choice voting. Do you believe the bigger cities or the smaller cities are more receptive, or does it not matter the size?
I don't think it really matters in size. I'm trying to think. There are approximately 50 cities in the United States that use ranked choice voting. They tend to run the gamut.
Okay.
Utah was kind of a game changer up until Utah basically passed like a pilot program, and then cities could opt in, and then these 23 cities have chosen to opt in, and they vary in size. I think the biggest one is Salt Lake City, and then I think the smallest one may be Moab. Moab only has a couple thousand people. So I don't think it really matters. I mean, it just depends on the city and the electorate.
Sure. So what arguments have people put against your organization's plan, and how do you counter those arguments?
So there are the general arguments against ranked choice voting, that it's complicated. It's not. Basically, there are several generalized arguments about ranked choice voting, but the core is that the people who are complaining about ranked choice voting essentially like plurality voting and have benefited from the current system. And that's fine, but I think, as I said before, our current system, I think, doesn't necessarily serve voters and serve our communities and things like that. The specific arguments are that it's complicated. I think anybody who has gone to the store or a restaurant during the supply chain crisis, got there and not been able to purchase the thing that they want, and then was forced to make a backup choice, they can do ranked choice voting. It's
Sure.
that simple in terms of making choices. There's become some nuanced arguments about what's uh, I just blanked on the term exhausted ballots. So ranked choice voting gives voters the freedom to rank as many or as few people as they want. And if you rank somebody on your ballot, if you don't end up ranking the candidate, one of the two candidates that makes it into the final round of the instant runoff, if the election goes to the instant runoff, then your ballot is quote unquote exhausted, and opponents will argue that that disenfranchises people. I don't agree with that. That's how the person chose to rank their ballot. That was their choice. And in reality, it's no different than our current system. If somebody chooses to vote for a third party or independent, and that candidate, isn't one of the top two candidates in the election. At least with ranked choice voting, you have the option to rank candidates to transfer your vote to a more popular candidate if your candidate doesn't make it to the last round of the instant runoff. And then, particular groups have particular complaints. Basically, kind of the America First Trump supporters think it's a communist plot. It's not. Again, they're comfortable winning, having candidates win, particularly in the primaries with like 30 or 40% of the vote, and having to win a majority vote, I think, scares them. That's my honest opinion, but that's just my personal opinion, not necessarily the opinion of Voter Choice Arizona. And particularly here in Arizona, the main issue is that of kind of the dynamic tension between cities and the state legislature. Our state legislature is slightly Republican, but since they have the majority, they can do what they want, and they tend to exert influence over the cities within the state. So there's a distinction in Arizona between cities that were around before Arizona became a state. Those are called charter cities. They incorporated. They had a city charter, and they were here before Arizona became a state. So they have a certain amount of autonomy, a certain amount of home rule. And any city that incorporated after Arizona became a state, they have more. The legislature has more control over them. So there's a little bit of a battle in terms of home rule and cities being able to do what they want, and having to struggle with the legislature and fearing that the legislature will overrule or sue them or what have you if they choose to make changes that the legislature doesn't agree with.
So kindly tell us what activities Voter Choice Arizona does.
Basically, we are just trying to get out and about and talk to Arizonans about ranked choice voting. We don't care who you are, where you are in the political spectrum. If you'd like to hear about ranked choice voting, we want to talk to you. So we're out and about in the communities, at events, at protests, speaking to groups. We're just trying to get out and talk to people about ranked choice voting, because essentially once they hear about it and they understand it, they tend to like it and get it. So it's essentially just a matter of getting out and doing education. And then, like I mentioned, we have a specific team that's working on local adoption. So they actually speak to elected officials and staffs and things like that, and do the kind of the nitty gritty of kind of the back end in terms of trying to whip up a round of votes on the city council to get a ballot referral, working on, language, assuring city councils that, particularly of the charter cities, that they have the power to implement ranked choice voting, that the state doesn't have the power to, dictate to them how they do their elections, stuff like that.
Sure. So kindly tell our audience how they can support your organization.
Obviously, we have a website, voterchoicearizona.org. You're welcome to follow our social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Reddit. we're most active on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. But if you want to either hit us up on our social media or website, you're more than welcome to join and volunteer. We're a nonprofit, so obviously funds are always scarce and needed. So if you'd like to make a donation, that would be greatly accepted. If you have friends or family, if you yourself are in Arizona, or if you have friends or family in Arizona, please let them know that we exist. You know, a large part of what we do is just letting the choir know that we exist so that we can go out and preach to them. Like I said, once we talk to people and explain what ranked choice voting is all about, they tend to be in favor of it. So, you know, it tends to be kind of a collective effort. I do my best to let my friends and family in other states know about other organizations that, you know, are working towards ranked choice voting. So if we all kind of pull together, I think we can get this accomplished much more quickly.
Yes. You mentioned that you're on Reddit. In what capacity do you have a thread on Reddit?
We have a subreddit,
Okay.
but it's not terribly active. As the social media team person, I don't particularly understand Reddit or have invested the time to learn Reddit. So I apologize about that, but we should have a subreddit for Voter Choice Arizona.
That's great. I don't hear too many activist organizations that use Reddit that way, so good job in leveraging that.
Thank you.
John, thank you kindly for coming on the podcast today and sharing the exciting things that your organization is doing.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
All the best to you and your organization.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.